What's going on, guys? Welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Football Show, hosted by me, Colin Ellis. Today is November 2nd, 2020. For today's show, we're going to talk about some news and notes, of course. Talk about some injuries that happened this weekend from the slate of games from this Sunday. Talk about some breakout performances and some poor performances, some studs and some duds from this past Sunday's games, as well as talk about my starts of the week suggestions going into this Sunday. And lastly, wrapping up, going to talk about my weekly pick'em results, kind of highlight how I did picking the winners and losers of this weekend's games. So starting off, to go over some news. So this morning, Marlon Humphrey, cornerback for the Baltimore Ravens, has tested positive for COVID, and A.J. Dillon is out this Thursday due to COVID protocol, so he also tested positive. Just as of about 10 minutes ago, Chargers cornerback Desmond King is going to be traded to the Tennessee Titans, as well as Kuwan Alexander, the linebacker for the 49ers, is being traded to the Saints for a 5th-round pick and likely a player. Both of those, according to Adam Schefter. So the Titans getting another piece to help their already pretty stout defense, except for this weekend against the Bengals, of course. The Bengals getting that upset. The Saints looking to add to their defensive depth with Kuwan Alexander. He'll definitely help them out as they look to make a playoff push. So let's just go ahead and get into the breakout performances from this week. So I'm going to break them down position by position, starting off with the quarterbacks. Pat Mahomes with a great matchup against the New York Jets. Was the quarterback one on the week. He finished with 38.6 fantasy points. He was 31 of 42 with 416 yards and 5 touchdowns. He had a great game. The Jets were pretty stout defensively on the ground, surprisingly, and hung around in the first half, which allowed the Chiefs to keep putting the ball in the air. And Travis Kelce and surprisingly Mecole Hardman were his 2 top targets from this game. The Chiefs got the job done as everyone predicted. Russell Wilson, the QB2 on the week, finished with 30.7 fantasy points. He was 27 of 37 with 261 yards, 4 touchdowns, and rushed for 24 yards as well. Seattle did get the job done against the 49ers. And Wilson had another great game. He really went to DK a lot in this game. DK Metcalf had an incredible game. We'll talk about that later on in the show. Next, Aaron Rodgers, the QB3 on the week. He finished with 22.5 fantasy points. He was 27 of 41 with 291 yards and 3 touchdowns. Aaron Rodgers had a great game, but the Packers just could not stop the Vikings offense, and that offense being Dalvin Cook. I mean, Dalvin Cook had an incredible game. RIP to everyone who faced him. That was me. It was not very fun. I'll talk about really the most pain with that with the Dalvin Cook production. But yeah, Aaron Rodgers went to Devontae Adams a lot. The Packers, they could not stop Minnesota, and Minnesota went into Green Bay and got the upset win. Next, QB4, Matthew Stafford with 22.4 fantasy points. He was 24 of 42 with 336 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. This performance was surprising to everyone, really, because of Indianapolis's stout defense this whole season. But Matthew Stafford got the job done without his main target in Kenny G for most of this game. And then Phillip Rivers in the same game as the quarterback 5 with 22.3 fantasy points, 23 of 33, 262 yards and 3 touchdowns. He went to the running back a lot in this game, and we'll talk about that later as well. I'm just going to backtrack and go into some injury report for this week. The 49ers, it's just been a very unfortunate season for them as far as their health is concerned. Jimmy G went down with his ankle again. They rushed him back too soon, I believe, and it's just not good for the 49ers. I mean, they do have Nick Mullins, who has done it before. He's played quite a bit as a backup, and he stepped into this game and performed pretty well. He brought the 49ers back into this game, made it competitive near the end. But again, Jimmy G's ankle is something to monitor this whole week. It's not looking good. George Kittle went down like 2 plays later. He had a great grab from Nick Mullins. He threw the ball up to the sideline, and George Kittle made a great contested catch over 2 players. But he came up, celebrated, went over, was ready for the next play, but then the refs called it dead, and he had to limp off. He had a foot x-ray, and that was negative. However, that doesn't really reveal much. It just reveals bone structure, and so if any tendons or soft tissue is hurt in the ankle/foot area, lower leg, it's something to monitor. The 49ers' health has not been good this season. Kyle Shanahan said in the press conference after the game, he said, quote, he hopes to have Jordan Reed available for next week. And that kind of says a lot about the health of George Kittle. It's not looking good to play next week. But we'll have to monitor this the rest of the week. Tevin Coleman, running back 49ers, he came out of the game due to a knee injury, and it was the same knee that put him onto the IR. So this is definitely important to watch. Jermichael Hasty, he could be the only healthy running back in this backfield. And so as far as waivers for tomorrow, I think he's someone that you need to pick up given you pay attention to the news in this 49ers backfield. Fred Warner, the linebacker for the 49ers, I didn't do much research on this injury, but I know that he is a huge part of that 49ers defense. He does everything. He shuts down wide receivers, tight ends, running backs. He stops the run. He's a great player, but he went down, unfortunately, in the game against Seattle. And if he misses a few games, then that'll definitely not help. So now moving on, Kenny Golladay, wide receiver, Detroit Lions. He went out with a hip injury. He came out and did not play the second half, I do believe. He's the premier wide receiver for the Lions, and it does not help their team, that's for sure, without him on it. Next, Darrell Henderson. He came out with a thigh injury against the Miami Dolphins. This was the same thigh that he had issues coming into the week with, so this is something to monitor. T.Y. Hilton with a groin injury. As far as fantasy is concerned, I think this is the point where you drop him if you haven't dropped him already. Gardner Minshew with his finger fracture. They had the bye this week, but something to watch for this week to see if he plays. It's doubtful that he plays. So if you have pieces in this offense, this is something to watch. Sam Darnold with a shoulder injury, the same shoulder they had issues with this season and missed a few weeks with. He took a hit scrambling, trying to gain some yardage on the ground, but he took a large hit and he was slow to get up. He could have hurt his shoulder on that play. It's something to watch for the rest of this week. Now, moving back into studs in the running backs, studs for the running back position. Dalvin Cook, RB1, 53.6 fantasy points. He had 30 carries, 163 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 catches, 63 yards, and a touchdown. 4 total touchdowns. What a game. Huge game from Dalvin. I touched on this earlier last week. He was one of my breakout performance candidates, and he followed up with an incredible performance. No one could have expected 50-plus points in PPR, but yeah, I mean, what a game. What a game from Dalvin Cook. He benefited from a positive game script. He benefited from the poor weather. He benefited from having a few weeks off with the bye and the injury to get healthy. I mean, he's incredible. What a player. He looked very good, very explosive, making guys miss, running over guys. What a game. So, as I said, I was going to get into this a little bit more. Earlier this season, I had Dalvin Cook, and I traded him away because I believed in Jonathan Taylor, and I made a trade away from Dalvin Cook for Jonathan Taylor, and this week I played the owner of Dalvin Cook, and it didn't turn out very good. I'm getting blown out 170 to like 60. I mean, it just was not a good week for me. Not a good week for me. As well as being a Pats fan, just getting absolutely railed by the Bills. Pats looked good to come back in that game, but Cam puts the ball on the floor. We lose the game. Disappointing week for me. And for the NFL football season and as well as fantasy. Yeah, not a good week. However, it was a great week for Alvin Kamara, running back 2 on the week, 25.3 fantasy points, 12 carries, 67 yards, 9 catches, 96 yards. He's a beast. He's right there. He got into overtime as well, got some more touches. But if you have Alvin, you're happy with that for sure. Didn't get into the end zone, which would have only helped, but 25 points without a touchdown is incredible. That's great. That's what Alvin does. He's a beast. Giovanni Bernard was the RB3 on the week with 22.8 fantasy points, 15 carries for 62 yards, a touchdown, 3 catches for 16, and another touchdown. He got the job done against Tennessee. Tennessee just didn't look up for this game. Cincinnati was doing whatever they wanted on offense, it kind of seemed like, on the ground and through the air. And Tennessee just couldn't really fight back. Cincinnati got up early, and Tennessee put up a comeback, but it just wasn't enough. DJ Dallas was the RB4 on the week, 18 carries, 41 yards, a touchdown, 5 catches for 17 yards, and another touchdown. He benefited from a banged-up backfield. It was only him and Travis Homer, and DJ Dallas got the bulk of the work. He looked pretty decent. He looked really elusive and explosive. Depending on the health of Carlos Hyde and Chris Carson, he could be something for next week as well. Nyheim Hines, the RB5 on this week with 21 fantasy points. He had only 5 carries for 8 yards, but 3 catches for 54 and 2 touchdowns. Incredible celebration. I mean, that has to be said first off. A cartwheel entry into a backflip with a full twist. I mean, with a helmet and pads on your legs. I mean, what a beast. Like, what an athlete. Yeah, limited touches, 10 touches for 21 fantasy points. That'll work, but not very many people played him in this game. And transitioning into Phillip Lindsay, RB6 on the week, 20.6 fantasy points, 6 carries, 83 yards, a touchdown, and one catch for 3 yards. He had an explosive play where he busted off a nice little run for 40+. I feel bad for Phillip Lindsay. I've always really liked him because of his story of just being like someone that no one really counted on, and being an undrafted rookie and just being a beast for the past few seasons. But then Melvin Gordon comes in and kind of takes away from his touches. It's a true 50-50 timeshare like we saw last season with Lindsey and Freeman. But Lindsey is a great player. He has that explosive ability, and he showed that against the Chargers. Jordan Wilkins, the RB7 on the week. He had 20.3 fantasy points, 20 carries, 89 yards, a touchdown, and a catch for 24 yards. My bad week only got worse when I saw that the two other Indianapolis Colts running backs got 20-plus fantasy points each. Phillip Rivers is a check-down quarterback, and we've seen that for the past few seasons with the Chargers. And they haven't really needed to use Jonathan Taylor for that work at all when they have Nyheim Hines back there. But Jordan Wilkins got 20 carries, which is super concerning for me for Jonathan Taylor. I mean, Jonathan Taylor should be the back. And it was really frustrating because I feel like Jonathan Taylor does not get any good work. I feel like when Taylor comes in, it's when they have a fullback and a couple tight ends and everyone knows that they're going to run the ball up the middle. They got down to the goal line. They were at the 1-yard line, and they gave it to Jonathan Taylor twice. And it was just run up the middle. Oh, that got blocked. All right, let's put in Jordan Wilkins. And then Jordan Wilkins gets it's just him and Rivers in the shotgun. No tight ends in there, so there's a lot less guys, and then the hole is just wide open for him. So super frustrating for Jonathan Taylor owners, myself included. It doesn't really seem to be going his way. Frank Reich said in his press conference, and it was posted in the Indianapolis Star, that he had a game script going into this game at the beginning to give all three backs work. See what works, see what doesn't, and Wilkins and Hines were what worked, and so Jonathan Taylor kind of got scripted out. However, Phillip Rivers said in his post-game interview, he said, quote, I believe he said Jonathan Taylor was a little bit nicked up when talking about the running backs. So that's something to monitor this week, see if that is true, see what the injury report is saying. Maybe take these Colts running backs' performances with a grain of salt, and if Taylor is to miss any time, then obviously boost up Wilkins. I'd rather have Wilkins over Hines for volume. But yeah, Jonathan Taylor is concerning for me. Moving on now into wide receiver studs. DK Metcalf, the wide receiver 1 on the week with 42.1 fantasy points. He had 15 targets, 12 catches, 161 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He showed what a beast he is. He's an animal. He's an animal. He is fast, he's strong, he's big, he's all of those things and more. And especially compared to who he's going up against. Devontae Adams, wide receiver 2 on the week. He had 30.3 fantasy points, 12 targets, 7 catches, 53 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Moving back to my fantasy matchup this week, I had to go up against Dalvin Cook and Devontae Adams. So currently those two players are outscoring my entire team by 10 points, and I only have Tom Brady left this week. So, yeah, my whole team kind of did not perform, to put it lightly. And also, every touchdown in this game went to the 2 players that I played against. So, that was super cool also. But yeah, Devontae Adams, he's a beast. Gets targets from Aaron Rodgers, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. If you're a Devontae Adams owner, keep that guy. Moving on now to Robert Woods, wide receiver 3 on the week. Both of the Rams wide receivers got it done against the Dolphins, which I didn't really expect. I expected Miami's defense to hold their own against the Rams' pass attack and kind of get exposed on the ground, but I was wrong. Robert Woods had 28.4 fantasy points, 8 targets, 7 catches, 85 yards, a touchdown, and 2 carries for 9 yards and a touchdown. He got into the end zone a few times. He had a great game as the Rams had to come back against the Dolphins, which no one really expected. But the Rams went down early, and they went down big early, so they had to rely on the passing game. Corey Davis, the wide receiver 5 on the week, 26.8 fantasy points, 10 targets, 8 receptions, 128 yards, and a touchdown. Corey Davis was getting a lot of looks in this game as the Titans had to come back against the Cincinnati Bengals. The work went to him rather than A.J. Brown. Brown did get another touchdown grab. That's 5 in 4 games. But I think that Davis is still the third option in this pass attack behind Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith still, despite Smith's quiet game. Brandon Ayuk, wide receiver 6 on the week currently, 23.1 fantasy points, 11 targets, 8 catches, 91 yards, and a touchdown. Due to these injuries that the 49ers are putting up with, I do trust Nick Mullins. He's a decent quarterback. He's better than Ben DiNucci. I mean, that game last night was terrible. But, yeah, I think if you picked up Brandon Ayuk, which a lot of people did this week, I think you should keep him. He is a good option moving forward currently, and especially with Kittle being out. Mecole Hardman, wide receiver 7 on the week, 22.6 fantasy points, 9 targets, 7 catches, 96 yards, and a touchdown. That I guess it was a receiving touchdown, but the little touch pass. Mecole Hardman had a great game. Tyreek Hill also had a good game. Tyreek was wide receiver 4 on the week. I just wanted to highlight Mecole Hardman because he's least often in these wide receiver 1 positions. He's getting a lot of targets. Mecole Hardman's someone to look out for. He did this with no injuries. The Chiefs did throw the ball quite a bit. Pat Mahomes threw it 42 times. 9 targets went to Hardman. Hardman had a good game. I mean, simple as that. Cooper Kupp, the wide receiver 8 on the week, 22 fantasy points, 21 targets, 11 catches, 110 yards. Yeah, 21 targets. I was looking through the stats, making the script for this week, and the script for this Monday, and I was looking at the performances. I was like, okay, yeah, 11 targets, 12 targets, 15 targets, that's all good. And I get down to Cooper Kupp, and it says 21 targets. I'm like, there's no way. But, yeah, 21 targets for Cooper Kupp. As I said, the Rams had to really throw the ball as they went down big early to Miami Dolphins. And, great performance from him. A little bit of some breaking news. Lions wide receiver Kenny Golladay is expected to be out this week and will be considered week to week going forward with a hip injury sustained yesterday. Sources say he will have more tests, but that is where it stands for now, end quote. Unfortunate news for him. Marvin Jones had a good game. That is something to highlight if you want to pick up another Detroit Lions wide receiver. Moving on now to the tight end breakout performers, the studs of the tight end position. Travis Kelce, tight end 1 on the week, 24.9 fantasy points, 12 targets, 8 receptions, 109 yards, and a touchdown. He was getting the ball thrown to him often. He is the first read. He's the number 1 option in this passing attack, I think. Yes, you have Tyreek Hill and Mecole Hardman and Sammy Watkins when he's healthy, and Robinson and Pringle and all of these guys. But I think that Kelce he's a great player. He's the number 1 tight end to have. He's who Pat relies on most often. Jared Cook with a tight end 2 performance so far with 16.1 points, 7 targets, 5 catches, 51 yards, and a touchdown. He had a great game. Came down with that touchdown grab, and that's really all it takes to be a tight end one at the tight end position. Now moving on to Eric Ebron, another touchdown grabbed from him with 14.8 fantasy points, 5 targets, 4 catches, 48 yards. He came down with a touchdown grab against the Ravens, which was an incredible game to watch. TJ Hawkinson, tight end 4 on the week, 13.5 fantasy points, 10 targets, 7 catches, 70 yards. Great performance from him. He was getting the ball thrown to him often from Matthew Stafford. I think that some production from Kenny G went to him this week and could go to him again this next week with Kenny G being out, as we just found out. Robert Tonyan, tight end 5 on the week, 12.9 fantasy points, 7 targets, 5 catches, 79 yards. I think he's still going to keep this up with this Green Bay offense. It is a good offense to have pieces in. He played well. I think that if he is on your waivers at any point, he could be a good add. Transitioning now into the duds, the poor performers from this week. Going to break it down position by position. Now, the quarterbacks, Carson Wentz, I touched on this in a podcast, which we had some technical difficulties with, unfortunately. Carson Wentz, if you watch that from that first drive, really just sums everything up. He's going up against a poor defense. He thinks he has to do everything, and he's rolling to the left. There's no one over there, none of his pass catchers. There might be one kind of streaking over, but it's like a deep shot. I mean, no one's over there. And he sees the Cowboy coming to bring him down in the backfield, and he still puts the ball up and just gets sacked for no reason. He should have thrown the ball away. There's no one over there. And he doesn't throw the ball away. He doesn't just take the sack. He takes the sack and fumbles and gives the ball to the Cowboys. I mean, he had 8.6 fantasy points. He had a great matchup. He just did not get it done. I don't know. Carson Wentz, you picked him up and expected a lot more from this in this great matchup, but he just remains inconsistent. Moving now into the next quarterback, Jimmy G. I thought that he would have a great game this week. He had 1.7 fantasy points. He did get hurt, but even before he got hurt, he was not playing well. He was not pushing the ball down the field, which I said he didn't need to, and he just was not getting it done. Moving on now to running backs. Jonathan Taylor, 5.1 fantasy points. I'm concerned, but I think that Rivers saying that he was a little nicked up is something to pay attention to, and if that has some truth behind it, then maybe these concerns for Taylor are negligible and aren't as prevalent as it seemed in this game. Now moving into the next player, DeAndre Swift. He had 5.3 fantasy points, but he only had 1 rushing yard. He did outsnap Adrian Peterson, which is important to highlight, but a poor matchup. You weren't expecting very much from him, I don't think. I think it's important that he outpaced Peterson in snaps, routes run, and all of those important stats for running backs. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 6.1 fantasy points, the fresh Prince of Hilaire. He only had one, there wasn't very much production on the ground for this Chiefs offense because they didn't really need it. I mean, Clyde, with Le'Veon Bell coming into this backfield, It's concerning for him and Bill. They both eat into each other's workloads. Great matchup this week. I'm concerned if I'm a Clyde owner. Kareem Hunt, 9.3 fantasy points. He looked, every time he got the ball, he looked incredible. I mean, just running over guys, juking them out of their shoes, just running after contact, carrying guys on his back. But he only had 9.3 fantasy points in this great matchup with the weather and the Raiders' poor run D. But he didn't get a lot of passing work. But still, he still remains a great RB1 play if you have him. Maybe this could be a buy low off of this poor performance from the Hunt owner, especially as Nick Chubb will be coming back fairly soon. Ezekiel Elliott had 8.3 fantasy points in this game against the Eagles. He didn't really have a great matchup, but I'm worried. I don't want Zeke. If you can trade him away and get a top 15 type of guy out of him, then maybe you do that. I'm concerned. I mean, like I said, I've been talking about this for the past few weeks. Not past few weeks, but the past week. That I don't want Zeke. I don't want Zeke. Now that we are wrapping up the running backs, I just got a new tweet come in. Kevin Bowen at KBowen1070 just tweeted. Rich said that Jonathan Taylor has a quote little bit of an ankle end quote issue. But it didn't come up during the game. Something Reich learned after. I said Rich, I meant Reich. Dang it. But yeah, Indianapolis does play Baltimore next week, so it's not ideal. Look at adding Jordan Wilkins. I think that's where the work will go. Definitely something to monitor this week. Tomorrow we'll talk more about waivers. So now, wide receivers, DJ Moore, 7.5 fantasy points. He had a great matchup. Carolina as a whole had a poor offensive showing when I called for their breakouts in Teddy Bridgewater and Robbie Anderson. Tyler Lockett, 7.3 fantasy points. Just a week after his huge performance of 50-plus fantasy points. Personally, I am an owner of Tyler Lockett, and I saw this coming. He is very boom and bust. But, I mean, you had to play him after that huge breakout. But, yeah, like I said, not the greatest matchup, but Seattle got it done through the air, not through Lockett. But yeah, the squeaky wheel always gets the oil, and that was DK this past week. Lockett could go off next week. That's just kind of the player he is, and we just saw it with DK. Next, Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. Jefferson with 6.6 fantasy points. Thielen with 5.7 fantasy points. The Vikings only threw the ball, I think, 14 times. And that's because they didn't need to. It was bad weather, and they got up early with Dalvin Cook, and they had incredible success with Dalvin Cook. They didn't need to throw the ball. But I was sitting Justin Jefferson in every league that I had him in. I was kind of expecting this with the weather and the poor Packers run defense. But yeah, I think it was just kind of a 1 week thing. Cook's dominance is something to note. Maybe they go to him more often, give him more touches. But yeah, moving on to Calvin Ridley, 7.2 fantasy points. He did hurt his ankle. That is something to monitor the rest of this week. AJ Green, 9.3 fantasy points. Higgins and Boyd were the performers this week once again for Cincinnati. they are the wide receivers you want. AJ Green, I'm probably dropping him anywhere I have him. Now moving on to tight ends, Mark Andrews, 6.2 fantasy points. He had a poor matchup against the very stout Pittsburgh defense, but you couldn't sit him. I mean, he's not the kind of player that you can sit. Jonnu Smith, 4.9 fantasy points. He had a great matchup, but he just did not get it done against the Cincinnati Bengals. So that wraps up duds from this week at their position. Moving on now to recap my starts of the week. I missed a lot this week. I did not really hit, but on the ones that I did hit on, I think kind of count. They cover the rest of my poor calls, right? So Jimmy G, disappointing, 1.7 fantasy points. We just covered that. Teddy was also disappointing with a great matchup against Atlanta with only 12 fantasy points. He finished the week at QB 20. And I believe Taysom Hill had a better quarterback finish. He caught a pass and was getting it done on the ground against Chicago. But, yeah. Dalvin Cook's breakout, I called that one. He exploded against the poor Green Bay run D. RB1, they only threw the ball 14 times. This was kind of something that I was highlighting in the matchups last week. Jonathan Taylor, 5 points. Don't really know what happened here. Could be the ankle injury. We don't really know. Again, he doesn't really get the great touches like he's running against stacked boxes, and it's really frustrating as a Jonathan Taylor owner. Robbie Anderson hasn't finished this week with the Monday games pending. However, he currently is the wide receiver 39. He had 9.8 fantasy points. I expected the Falcons to struggle in the secondary with their poor secondary and banged up secondary, but it was Curtis Samuel who got the production. He caught a touchdown pass. He also ran one in. Curtis Samuel was the wide receiver 10. Sometimes it's just how it goes. Little disappointed with that, but it very easily could have been Robbie Anderson. Gronk has not played yet, but I still fully believe that he will have a great game. If you're relying on him to win you a game this week, he really could do that. If you're down by, say, 17 or 18 points, he could come down with a touchdown grab or two. Richard Rodgers, complete dud. I don't think he scored any fantasy points. Goddard came back. We didn't know that when I called the breakouts. Super disappointing for Rodgers owners and those who picked him up. And even if he pivoted to Goddard, they did not get the job done. It was through, they got their production through Travis Fulgham. And now moving on to defenses, Philly. The Philadelphia Eagles defense was the second best defense on the week with 20 points. I mean, they got the job done. And the Rams D was number 11 on the week with 5 points. So now wrapping up, going into the last segment in this fantasy football show on November 2nd. I was 9-4 with my picks this week. I thought the Broncos one was super unfortunate. The Broncos came back and won the game, and I really I thought that the Chargers were going to finally wrap up a game, but they just were not able to. They just cannot run the ball super effectively, I don't think. The Dolphins surprised everyone, I think. That was another one of my losses. The Vikings, I had little faith in them, but Dalvin Cook got them ahead early, and they really just kind of coasted from there. And now I don't think many people picked the Bengals to beat the Titans, including me. The Titans kind of choked, and the Bengals got it done. Joey Burrow is really good. I mean, there's not much more to it. I mean, he keeps plays alive. He has an incredible arm, very athletic, sneaky athletic, I'd say. But yeah, I think that kind of wraps up today's show. Thank you very much for watching this Monday show. Tomorrow we'll be uploading the Tuesday show. I'm going to go over waiver picks. Might have some of the boys join me as well. And tomorrow is going to be a mid-season kind of mid-season review, mid-season recap. We're going to go through the top 12 in each position, talk about who is the biggest surpriser, who's the biggest surprise in those top 12 spots, and who could sneak into those top 12 spots. So yeah, thank you very much for watching another episode of the Fantasy Football Show, hosted by me, Colin Ellis, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow. Thank you for watching.